Hello. Sorry, I'm a little louder. IP, UP, we all pee on UPNP. Are any of you familiar with UPNP? It's a horrific protocol. I made some fun tools for it that I'm going to distribute. So my actions and opinions are not a reflection of my former employer. The tools and knowledge about to be given to you are for educational purposes only. I am not responsible in any way for the way you use the information and tools given to you. So get good kids, use VPNs, and no Vagaro. So who am I? I'm Peanutter. I was the founder of the Cisco Ninjas. We were infamous for breaking into about 5 million routers back in the day. Defy All Boundaries was a group that we created when we were learning binary exploitation. Some of the same members from Cisco Ninjas were in there. DARPANET, a network that I currently run, called Dangerous. What is it? Dangerous Product Alliance. I forget. Telco Ninjas was a telephone freaking group that I belonged to. We would break into voicemail systems, do CCI TT5 vulnerability testing using satellites, all sorts of fun things. And the Dope House Ninjas was another group. Lots of ninjas. I didn't pick all the names. There it is. Dangerously Advanced Research Project Alliance. We're a group of people that occasionally get together and build fun projects and break into lots of things. We do it on a private network. We don't use our normal aliases. There's no way to say who was speaking at any given time. Come play with us, irc.darpanet.org. Stick around and we'll build stuff together. So why talk about UPNP? 30 million vulnerable devices. Honeypot gathering, you can do port forwarding. So port forward all the port 80s to your host, emulate web applications, find the latest vulnerabilities people are testing for. DNS man-in-the-middle attacks. Using UPNP, I can change DNS on your router, play man-in-the-middle attacks, and make Yahoo result in my web server, use web exploitation kits against your network's users. Port scanning internal hosts. So this is where we add an external port that points to an internally nated IP address. I can bypass your native firewall with it. Authentication doesn't exist for this protocol. I'm not breaking the law unless I make a modification to it. And SSDP Dr. DOS. So previously there was a distributed reflective denial of service stack for UPnP. And you would get about 300 kilobit reflection attack off of it. I found a way to amplify it by 254 times. I'll show you how to do that in this. It makes it the largest distributed reflective denial of service attack to date. The previous one that I found was an SNMP bulk walk, where you could pass the base mid tree, everything on the SNMP. This is much more significant. And I haven't sent anything to CERT. They can figure it out. So UPnP, punch holes in name. What you're doing is, through SOAP requests to the UPnP server using my tools, you can set the ports, scan internal hosts, see if they have vulnerabilities, and penetrate them. Very straightforward. It also has a side effect of sometimes with older versions of mini UPnPD, you can point to an external host and an external port. So now I can use your router to bounce to IRC or to Cisco and make you attributable for my actions. Luckily, it doesn't log any actions that are made against the UPnP service, so good luck figuring out it was me. It's used by Xbox, torrent clients, media servers, all kinds of equipment. Some of your Internet of Things devices in your house. Has a twin brother called NatePnP, made by Apple. The exact same vulnerability, just a different protocol. I didn't build tools for that. I only came up with about 800,000 vulnerable devices for that when I scanned the internet. Top countries with it open. We have China with nearly 600,000, Russia with 250,000, and so on. The way I've designed my tools is a little unique. I've scanned the internet, I broke down every IP address by country, and databased it. So if you want to change all the DNS in Russia, feel free. Just don't blame me. Demo. Maybe. So here's our tool. I'll share the link with you to download it afterward. It has various functionality, but we're going to show off pulling usernames from a predefined list so that my talk didn't have a failure. You'll see here where I'm doing a get username request, and I'm doing set DNS against prefound hosts or IP addresses that I know will be successful for the talk. But within the directory, you're going to find 30 million vulnerable IP addresses broken up by country, like I had said. These are the usernames to log into the devices, which is great to be able to get a username, but I'm capable of setting the username as well as setting a password, downloading the configuration to get the original password. A lot more, to be honest. I'll show you as we go to the next tool. Threads. The countries are broken down into the 2-letter country code. So we have Russia, China, all the major players. Let's show you how China would work. So UPNP works over a UDP protocol on port 1900. And sending a UPNP search against a multicast address internally on a network will give you results. But a lot of product manufacturers have made it available on the WAN side of the Internet Gateway device. So we're able to scan them online. I didn't actually expect to get results on this, so I'm kind of surprised. Why it's interesting is even if you turn UPNP off, it doesn't turn off on a lot of devices. It turns off the UDP service that tells you where to get these various, one second, I'll show you. Where to get the control ports. But if you already know where the control ports that are run on a TCP service exist, if you already know where the control port exists in the XML file name for the SOAP request, it doesn't tend to close the TCP port, so you can still control the UPnP. My second tool goes and attacks that vector. So even if you've disabled UPnP on your home router, you're likely still vulnerable. Here you can see it pulling up the XML files. These are the action scripts telling you how to communicate with the SOAP service. This is the TCP port. There's about 40 ports in total that different devices use. They think that obfuscation will help them, but they make it the same across all of their devices, which is not good. So Simple Service Discovery Protocol, the SSDP. That'd be the UDP request that you're making against the remote server. IGD, your Internet Gateway device. This is your home routers. And Open Connectivity is where you can find all the protocol specifications. It's not limited to this, though. I found it running on SCADA equipment, cellular towers, an electrical smart grid, and various other things. Media servers, routers, management devices, home automation, including your light bulbs and Internet of Things management and control, printers, so you can connect to your network through your Wi-Fi on your printer, and more. Simple Discovery, or Simple Service Discovery Protocol. It's used for advertising and discovering network services. By making a request to it, it tells you what services are available on the network. It runs over HTTPU, which is HTTP over UDP. And UDP 1900 always for this. vulnerable and open WAN side, which it usually is. Requires no authentication. Information disclosure about the devices on your network. It may show you other vulnerable devices. Older versions of mini UPnPD that run on some of your IoT devices within your house are RCE exploitable. So now I can take over your music player. It's public knowledge, there's public exploits for it on exploit.db or exploit.db. And the reflection attack from 2015. So if I send an SSDP request to your UPnP service with a spoofed IP address, as it's UDP, it'll respond with the services offered on your network. But the problem with that is that I can tell it the services that are offered on your network. I can stuff it with 254 different devices that are claiming to run UPnP for it to respond with, so I can amplify your payload. This is what a Internet Gateway device request looks like. It's pretty generic. If you set your time to wait a little higher, you can make all the devices, if you set it higher and then increment downward as you hit your devices with your request, you can make all the devices hit the remote target at the exact same time, which further amplifies the attack since it's now a time-based attack as well. So SSDP, distributed reflective denial service. UDP protocols can be spoofed, we all know this. Spoof a request from your target's IP and they'll receive the response, responsible for a 50 gigabit attack per second against Akamai. That was with the old technique. It would be times 254 with mine. You can add the amplification of an SSDP reflection attack. We've gone over that. I skipped ahead a bit. UPnP SSDP notify can be used to add services for up to 1,800 seconds. So you have several minutes that you can build up your amplification list before it all hits your target at the same time. And like I said, 254 services. The notify statement. It's pretty generic. The location is what matters. This right here. The reason it matters is if you close off the UDP UPnP service, if you already know where that location existed on other devices, you can test the device to see if it still has it open, which is where the next attack comes in. So you don't fund UPnP actions. I can delete your DNS server. I can set it, as I showed you with my previous demo. I can add the port mapping that allows me to bypass your NAT firewall. Delete a port mapping that's already been set, force a termination on the device. So if I wanted to knock out all the affected Internet Gateway devices in Russia, I just do force termination on all of them. Set an auto disconnect time. So maybe I don't want to do it for a while. I want to set it to do it tomorrow. So that if there's any chance of anything being left behind by the ISP, it's gone. Set an idle disconnect time, delete the access point settings, so now you can no longer connect to your Wi-Fi network or reboot the device, which is handy when you're modifying firmware. SOAP action. So when you receive the XML file from the IDG using the UPnP request, it gives you the URL to get the XML file, and it responds to you with actions that the SOAP server allowed. This is an example of one. This one is for setting the DNS server on a remote server. So long as you're sending this within your HTTP post request, you can make the change. I have another tool that I'll be showing you that allows you to do all the different actions, even if I haven't seen it before, because it breaks them down into categories and files for you. DNS man in the middle. By changing the DNS, I can forward you to my web server rather than the place you're looking to go. Use something like an interpreter, or not interpreter, Metasploit to do a browser-based exploit kit. JavaScript injections possible, so I can XSS beef you to control your browser on browsers that are still vulnerable to that. Coin hive and kittens. Add port forwarding. So there's several things you have to set within the action file to do the port forwarding. You have to give it the new remote host. which is actually the internalated IP or the external IP you want it to point to. The new external port, the port that it's connecting to. So if I want to connect you to CNN, I would have to give you port 80 or 443 is the forward. New protocol, I have to define TCP or UDP. New internal port, this is the port that I'm going to be connecting to your router with. Internal client is the IP address of your WAN device, so your external IP address. Whether I want it enabled or not, which I don't know why they would set that. The port mapping description, so I can add a brief description. A lot of the UPNP servers have buffer overflow issues and string format issues within this setting. And the least duration, which you can set infinite with using 0. Many UPNP limits on port forward. So UPNP was identified as having all these issues. With newer versions, they started restricting what you could do, such as no longer pointing at an external IP address with a newer device, and also the port ranges that you were allowed to actually port forward to. These are the limitations. I'll make the slide available, or the slides available at the end of the talk as well, so you can have this. Some implementations allow you to forward an external IP address. We've gone over that. If the HTTP management console for routers is on a particular IP, you can forward it to the external IP to bypass its configuration. It also works on port 80. Sometimes people have firewalled higher and lower ports. So if you still go through that port 80 on the device, it will no longer show the web administrative panel. It'll just forward you off to the remote device as it's using IP route to bypass it. You can port scan an internal network from UPnP, exploit vulnerable services that are behind the main firewall, such as file sharing. Upgrading the firmware. You can grab the firmware off of the router manufacturer's website, decompress it, backdoor it with your own username and password or services, compile whatever you want to that particular architecture, recompile it, and upload it to the device by exploiting the UPnP. Since you can log into the device, you can update the firmware with your own upload. So firmware mod kit is popular for that. It hasn't been updated in a long time, but it still works on many devices. Set username and password. This allows us to get into the routing device itself. It's pretty straightforward. It can be used for doing the firmware backdooring. It leaves no logs within the mini UPnP, and all the cool kids are doing it, although not me. Disable UPnP. It doesn't always work. As we said, we disable that UDP service. The TCP service that is actually the control port is usually still running on most devices. So SSTP returns a service located on the HTTP server. These are TCP services that we know that exist. This is normally how it works. If we scan the TCP ports themselves that we know the control port would be on and look for that XML file, we're able to get the actions that are capable on the device. So UPnP isn't really needed for the service control definitions. You can still modify the remote device's actions. And here we go. So I didn't code all of this. Some of it I stole a PHP script in particular. It will port scan the target with 250 threads, identifies ports, TCP ports known to control the remote device, checks for known SCPDs, which are the control ports, or control devices, generates a SOAP action request, which will be a text file that you can just edit with a Vim or Nano, and then paste into the remote service, and use netcat to apply. So here's that tool. It's not as descriptive as the previous one. It is at the end, but now let's scan it. It's done. Technical issues. So it's doing a TCP port scan for about 40 TCP ports that I've identified in the past as running the service, and it's looking for the XML files that it's seen on various devices in the past to see if it can identify any. It's pretty quick. And I'll go to 255. So these are the TCP ports that it's looking for. And as I scroll down, you're going to see all the different folders and XML files it's looking for on those various ports. So just because port 80 is open doesn't mean that it doesn't look for 5 to 10 different services running. As you can see here, some of the output shows the functionality that you can do with this device. Get info, DHCP, server configuration, get DNS, set DNS. But this is one that we've exploited already. So it breaks down based on the IP address and port, and then based upon the URN for each individual service. We'll look at the LAN device. So each individual action, even if I hadn't seen the device before, is available on this, which you wouldn't find in other tools. You would just run get. Netcat to the IP address. And the response will show the DNS server running remotely. There it is. Yeah, this was one of the ones we changed, choosing Google DNS now. But it allows you to do all the actions available to any of the different devices configured within the UPNP service. And it allows you to do it against it even if it's disabled UPNP on the remote devices web panel. So come hang out on irc.darpanet.org and we'll build things together. Since I had a half an hour talk and an hour to fill it in, I wanted to show some of the other fun things that I've been working on a little bit more recently than this. Can we get off the camera?